Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of TCG Talk, back today with another video. And in today's video, as you can tell by the title, we're going to be going over what is control versus what is mid-range versus what is aggro. Now, I think I've talked about this before on the channel, and I might have even made a video about it, but I'm more seasoned in the game, I guess is the best way to put it. And I think I have a better definition of what these things are. So I wanted to talk about this because it's always like a point of contention in the ninja channels. We have some ninja players who will die on the hill of mid-range, and hey, more power to you. If you want to play that way and you enjoy the game that way, do it. Like, it's awesome. But for newer players and for players who maybe are like trying to find their first decks, or maybe even kind of seasoned players who are trying to be able to define it more, I'm going to give my opinion on what I think aggro versus mid-range versus control is, because I think it's really important, because if you define it improperly, I think you're just going to make a deck bad. And I'll kind of explain why here in a second. But I wanted to bring three heroes up on the board here. We have Katsu, Dorinthia, and Oldheim. They all represent a different archetype, right? Katsu, it represents ninjas as a whole, in my opinion, which is aggro. Dorinthia represents mid-range, which is what most warriors can be. And Oldheim represents control in the guardian class. So the first thing I want to do is talk about what these terms definitely aren't, right? So like what definitely isn't like aggro. How do you not define it, right? The first thing you should not do as a new player, or even if you're a seasoned player, is don't define aggro, mid-range, and control in Flesh and Blood by resource generation, right? A lot of people that come from the Magic community will define aggro versus control versus mid-range in a resource way, right? And because like mono red, right, you don't need a whole lot of resources. You play early on your 1 and 2 drops, and you get creatures out really fast, and you start hitting, and eventually it builds. You know, mid-range, there's different color types and archetypes in mid-range, so where you focus on your 3 and 4 drops, right? Like you're really trying to get to the meat of your deck in order to play well, but they also can have a little bit of removal to slow you down while they're doing that, or like stopping you. And then you have control, right? Where they have a lot of, demir, and you have a lot of like removal and a lot of like slow burn stuff where you basically get your opponent to run out of all their threats, and you come in with like your key cards, or you just deck them out, or fatigue them. So all of those archetypes of Magic, I'm just gonna use Magic because it's the easiest, is based on land and resource generation, right? The thing about Flesh and Blood that makes this game so unique compared to other TCGs is your resources are your cards, right? That you also attack and defend with, right? So just because you have like Oldheim, for example, or not even Oldheim, any deck, just because I have 40 blues in my deck, right, out of 60 cards, which is a lot of resources, doesn't mean that I'm going to be playing control, right? I mean, I could put 40 blues in a Katsu deck that are mostly all 2 blocks, and they won't defend well. And so you can't use it by resource generation, because in the terms of Flesh and Blood and how this game is designed, it doesn't make sense. If you're trying to think of aggro versus mid-range versus control and resource generation, you're doing it wrong. I think that's pretty well understood. And like, if you disagree, you disagree, it's fine. But that if you're doing that, then you're just going to mess yourself up. So then you talk about the second common definition of mid-range, and this is what a couple of the ninjas in the ninja chat are saying it is. And if you're watching out there, I'm not going to name your names, but if you're watching and you disagree with this, it's totally fine. I get it. It's just my opinion. I'm not saying it's gospel. But a couple people think that mid-range means I can side into aggro if I'm playing control, or if I'm like a naturally control deck, I can side into aggro. I can play a little bit of both. Or I have one deck that does everything, that I can take the same hand and make it aggro, but also make it control. This game doesn't work that way. You can't do that, right? There's only one class in the game, in my opinion, that can take the same hand and make it block well, but also make it attack well, and that's Warrior, and we'll talk about that. Every deck can't do that. I can't take a Katsu hand and also make it like really defensive, but also make it really offensive. It doesn't work that way. Oldheim even can't do that, right? He has certain key cards like Oakenold, right, and certain like crazy cards, but other than that, he can't just take the same hand and make it super defensive, but also make it super aggro in comparison to the other aggro decks like Katsu, Briar, and Chain. He can put out some decent damage, but not to the point that they can. So like, it's not really mid-range. He is control. That deck is meant to be play control. Right. So I don't think that works either. I think what you'll do if you try to define mid-range in that way and play mid-range in that way, you're just going to make a bad deck. because what you're trying to do personally is you're trying to make a deck that's one type do a bunch of different things. And like I've said in this channel before, in this game, the top decks do one thing really freaking well. Chain does one thing really well, push damage. Oldheim does one thing really well. He can block 15 plus damage a turn, right? Starvo does one thing really well, pretty much, and he's kind of an anomaly because it's just the way the deck is. But all the decks that have been top in the game at one point, Briar, Cheerios, Briar, Fatigue, Prism, these different decks, even shoot back in the Welcome to Wraith days, like they all do one thing very, very, very well. Very few decks in the game, I can only think of 2 off the top of my head, have been able to pivot and do different things with the same deck. And that was Viscerai pre-Skeleton. He could go from like a Semio TKO to Aggro plan. And then Dorinthia Axes. She can do the same thing with the same cards. But both those decks aren't broken. They can just do multiple things. Other than that, there's very few decks that can do multiple things and still be relevant, right? But those decks take a lot of practice and a lot of good time to pilot. So because of that, like, how do you define aggro, mid-range, and control? I think personally it comes down to 2 things kind of woven together. One is, what is the average damage output per turn with the hero in its deck? What is the average damage output? And how well can I value block? How well can I block and still execute my game plan, right? So, for example, Katsu versus Oldheim. Oldheim does have turns where he can really swing and take tempo, like with his Oakenold, but generally, Oldheim is doing, I'm going to guess, 4 to 8 damage a turn. I haven't looked at like hand per hand and done all the crazy math, but just as a player, I'm going to guess 4 to 8 damage per turn. Whereas Katsu, I'm going to guess, as someone who's played Katsu a long time with a high aggro Katsu list, I'm going to guess I can do 12 damage a turn. Maybe 15, 12 to 15. 12 is a safe number, and if I'm drawing good, then 15 damage a turn. So that's why it's different, right? Oldheim can get up to 15 damage a turn, but he's going to have to change his deck type, and that's just a bad thing. Because the one thing about this game that people are just like choosing not to realize is these classes are meant to be played a certain way. Granted, yes, I think LSS made the hero system for 2 reasons. One, it gives you a reason to like identify with a hero and really get behind the thought and idea of a hero and thematics of it, and really be able to represent the one thing that everybody's always wanted to be, which is the hero, right? And I think the second reason is they're archetypes, right? A ninja on the left right here. Ninjas are meant to be quick and wispy and dive in and out and hit you when you're not looking and do like one quick key attack that you weren't expecting and then dive back in. But if you get a hold to a ninja, unless they're a samurai, you're going to kill them pretty quickly because they don't have much armor, right? They can be quick and dodge you maybe, like Benji, but they're not going to be able to take a lot of damage, right? Warrior is the reason Warrior is so good at mid-range is Warrior allows you to be able to attack decently while also defending decently, right? So Warrior, in real life, Warriors have really good armor where they can take decent amount of damage, but they also have really good weapons where they can hit you really, really well. So Warrior is the true mid-range class, in my opinion, because thematically it makes sense, right? Warriors are mid-range thematically. They aren't these insane assassins like Ninja can be, or like, even a Runeblade maybe can be, because those people are meant to kill. Warriors are meant to protect, but also meant to only protect and attack as much as needed. So thematically, it makes sense for the mid-range. Then you have Guardian on the right, my right, your left, I think, or my right, both of our rights. Where Guardians are meant to protect. They're meant to steadfast, right? They're meant to block and shield and do all these things, and then come at you with one really big attack that if they don't hit you, it's okay, because then they're just going to go back to being really defensive. So, it makes sense. Rangers are meant to hit you far away with a lot of on-hit effects, like if you got hit with a freaking arrow from 100 yards away. However, if anyone in here has played a video game, you understand that Rangers, if you get near them and you touch them with a weapon, they're going to die very quickly. Anyone who's played a video game, you just get up and close to the Rangers quickly as soon as possible, and then you kill them. So, all that to say, you need to pay attention to the hero type, because certain hero types are meant to be played a certain way. Ninja is not meant to be played defensive. It worked in Welcome to Wraith, and it worked a little bit in like the Crucible days, and even a little bit in the Monarch days because the game hadn't sped up yet. The design space hadn't expanded, and there wasn't ways to officially block him like there is now, or block ninjas in general like it is now. So it just doesn't work anymore. So all this to say, right, kind of get to the point. What is my idea of aggro versus mid-range versus control? Now that I got my soapbox out of the way, it's about two things. About, like I said before, about damage output and about how well can you value block while still executing your game plan. Ninja is aggro because Ninja has high damage output, but it doesn't have a lot of 3 blocks typically. And it does it. And if you put too much defense reactions or too many like sustaining cards in the deck, like sigils and stuff, it takes away from what Ninja is actually meant in trying to do, which is push damage. Then you have mid-range, the true mid-range, which is Axis Dorinthia, in my opinion. The reason Axis Dorinthia is mid-range is because she can output a medium amount of damage, but also value block a medium amount really well. Because all of her cards are 3 blocks. Every single card in the deck. Unless you run like non-warrior cards, almost all warrior cards, I can't even think of a warrior card off the top of my head that's a 2 block, are really good. There might be 1 or 2, excuse me if I'm not remembering. But regardless, she pushes out medium amount of damage, and when I say medium, I mean 8 to 12, maybe 10 to 15 if you have a really good deck and you're drawing well with Blade Runners and stuff. But Axis Dorinthia can block basically 4 to 7 damage a turn with 2 cards and Valiant Dynamo, and then come back at you with 10 damage. That's why she's mid-range, because she can value block, but also deal a medium amount of damage. That's what mid-range is in this game. Control is Oldheim. He doesn't rely on resource generation like in Magic. What he relies on is being able to basically block out more damage than you can output. He's going to block around 15 damage a turn. So that allows him to be able to play more control. He's not worried about hitting you really hard. He's worried about hitting you really hard a couple times a game, and that's it. Hence control. If you try to make an aggro Oldheim list, which I've played against, especially in Blitz, it hurts the hero's ability. Like I was playing Axis Dorinthia at the Battle in Dallas, and I played against 2 Oldheims. I played one against Extreme Fatigue Oldheim, had no chance of winning. Not no chance, but very little chance. Then I played an aggro Oldheim, and I beat him with Axis Dorinthia because he wasn't playing to his strengths, Crown of Seeds, and constantly blocking, using his defense react ability and stuff like that. So I was able to squeak in damage when I needed to, and then kill him with a Spill Blood Out for Blood turn at the end of the game. So it's the heroes are meant to be played a certain way. The top heroes in this game do one thing really well. If you try to do multiple things with a hero in this game, unless it's a warrior, in my opinion, you're making your deck worse because you're trying to do something and be super consistent with doing 2 different things, and it's just not going to work because they're going to be coming at you every single turn as hard as they can, whether it's control or aggro, and do it perfectly while you're trying to like juggle these different things in your deck, and it's just not worth it. And now, if that's what's fun for you, if you like that puzzle piece of trying to figure that out, go for it. Do it. Tell TCG Talk he's an idiot and just keep playing, right? But if you're wanting to be competitive, in my opinion, you got to go with the decks that do one thing really well. So if you're a new player, hopefully this made sense. Sounds like a little bit of a rant. It's just crazy how many people like don't have a definition for this, or their definition is very odd and it's pointing to other TCGs, and that's not what this game is. So hopefully it made sense to you. But if you like this, leave a like, comment, subscribe. If not me, go to our Fleshbread career, do the same thing for them so we can get more people seeing this game. And I'll see y'all next time on TCG Talk. Thank y'all so much.